Welcome to the inaugural episode of the podcast Data as the Fourth Pillar, the Board and CXO briefing. This executive briefing is designed to help boards and CEOs navigate the complexity of scaling AI. We have an incredible guest joining us today, an executive who not only has steered multiple technology companies, but also sits at the highest levels of corporate governance, guiding transformation in this new AI era.
Absolutely, Sujay. Our guest today is Ganesh Natarajan. He has various roles. He's a prolific author. He's a distinguished alumni from IIM and IIT Mumbai. And he has major success stories at various companies, but to call out a couple, Aptech and Zenzar Technologies.
When Ganesh led Zensar from 2001 to 2016, the company achieved an unparalleled market value growth of 44% annually in his final 5 years, a track record of success that speaks directly to understanding the transformation.
Today, Ganesh continues to strive strategic change. He serves as the chairman of 5F World and Honeywell Automation in India, as well as holds directorships on influential boards such as Hinduja Global Solutions and multiple corporations within SBI Group.
What makes his perspective uniquely valuable to our audience of boards and CXOs is his foundational understanding of enterprise knowledge. He holds a PhD in knowledge management, which directly informs his views on how organizations build intelligence from raw data.
Yes, and his current ventures, including chairing GTT Data Solutions, as well as his active role in the social sector, particularly with the Lighthouse Communities Foundation, shows that he understands the need to leverage data for scalable outputs, whether maximizing enterprise value or transforming lives.
Ganesh is perfectly positioned to discuss the imperative for boards and CXOs to reimagine their business, including their organization structure, to incorporate data as the definitive pillar within their operating model.
So let's dive right into the conversation with Ganesh Natarajan.
Hello, Ganesh. Welcome to this discussion on data as the fourth pillar podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much. Very good. I'm in New York, so it's early morning.
Oh, wow, that's great. If you could kick off, help our listeners learn about yourself, please, Ganesh.
Well, I mean, background wise, as you know, I ran two large public companies. In fact, we made them very successful. One was Aptech. I think that was 1991 to 2001. Then took on a little startup called Zensar Technologies, which we grew to almost 3,500 crores by 2016. And after that, I've been primarily doing some amount of consulting, initially with McKinsey, with the finance companies. Also, then joined the boards of State Bank of India. I still chair Honeywell Automation in India on the Hinduja Group board. And of course, we started our own company, which is primarily ended up in the data space, but it was primarily started off in skills called GTT, Global Talent Track. And just 2 years back, we merged with a data and an AI company and listed it on the Bombay Stock Exchange. It's called GTT Data Solutions Limited. And apart from that, very active in the social sector. So we have two large social enterprises, one primarily in the tribal girls' education, and the other is more in slum youth, putting them to work. And apart from that, of course, spend as much time with my grandson in New York as possible. So this is really my downtime month.
Awesome, awesome, Ganesh. And I think you mentioned a lot of things here, various industries, various experiences, various roles, as you mentioned. I'm sure you've seen various shifts as well from a technology and innovation standpoint, one of which we are in today, and as I'm sure we're all familiar with, especially since the advent of ChatGPT and GenAI. So how do you see this whole AI trend? There's a lot of discussion. Is it a bubble? There's a lot of discussion about also the positives, but also the negatives, especially in an enterprise and board context. How do you see AI in?
So that's a good question. And in fact, I mean, I keep talking about this. I was just in IIM Ahmedabad before I came here, talking to a bunch of corporate executives on the evolution of AI. And I think we all know how it started. I mean, digital has been there ever since I was doing digital in Zensar in the 2008 2009 time frame. But I think where it got serious was when people discovered the power of machine learning and artificial intelligence, and which moved from the classical descriptive analytics to predictive analytics, prescriptive analytics. And I think that's when people got very excited. And then, of course, as we all know, 3 years back came Sam Altman and the great GenAI breakthrough. And I think GenAI was very, very heavily hyped up. AI got mainstream, I think, 2 years ago. And today, I think, thanks to agentic AI, and I myself, as part of being on the board of the Hinduja Global Solutions, seeing a lot of amazing AI implementations, agentic AI, where literally master AI and slave AIs are running around doing 90% of the work that people are doing. So suddenly, I think it's infiltrating, if I may use the word, every business process. And there is no doubt that it's very, very serious. And I think what today boards are beginning to sit up and take notice, saying if I have to get value out of AI, it has to work for me, both in terms of scale as well as in terms of accuracy. I need to take notice, and it's become a board agenda. It's certainly a CEO agenda, and I think that's good news. I mean, the bubble part, of course, is true because I mean there is no doubt that there is some cyclical investments going on among all the tech majors. That is one. And the second, of course, is I mean, when you have Nvidia valued at $5 trillion, people sit up and take notice. And yesterday, I was listening to Ruchir Sharma, who was talking about this could be the third big bubble on the US stock exchanges because after 1929, after 1999, the dot-com bubble, and this is one of the huge overheating of the stock markets. So people are a little worried that if 52% of wealth in the US is now in equity markets and largely driven by AI, if that breaks, what will happen? I'm very positive that it will not break because there is a lot to be done. Will we realize the overinvestment benefits of AI in the short term? No. But in the medium term, I think it'll kind of even out and we will find that AI is not a dot com, more like the internet. It's very visceral and it's going to really change the way we live and work and talk and everything else.
Yeah, so I see a lot of differences, Ganesh, from the dot com to this one because the revenue models are quite clear. Yes, there will be over investment, there will be front running people will do to have differentiation. But however, when you're interacting and with your the depth and breadth of experience and talking to the boards and the CEOs, what is the level of hypeness? Are they really seeing that business benefits are in the horizon for them, or people are running behind the FOMO moment? Hey, I have to show something, we have to be in the press, we have to include in our annual reports, just show me lot of MVPs. I'm sure there'll be different profiles. Some are taking it in a more mature manner, some are trying to ride on that FOMO wave. What variety do you see on the boards and the CXOs?
I think there is a lot of realization, especially at chairperson and CEO level, that there is much to be done. And I think people are now realizing that when you talk about game changing AI, there is a need to reimagine your business. It's not like putting, in the old days, we used to call it putting lipstick on the bulldog. AI is not lipstick on the bulldog. So it is very much redefining whether it's a bulldog or something else. So from that point of view, reimagining a full business process, reimagining functions, looking at agentic AI and say where can it play a role, and then from that context, redefining the role of the human in the loop, saying that look, where does the human add value? And obviously, we cannot wish away human beings. We should not. And but there are tremendous amounts of work that humans can do in this process, but it'll be less. It'll be less of what we are experienced doing today. It'll be much more of what we have to learn to do tomorrow. And all these are very much board discussions. And right from, as I said, the CXO suite to all the way down the organization, I think we have to reimagine the organization, roles of people, and then refit the organization to something completely different. So that's scaring people a little bit. There is also the feeling of FOMO, as you said, that look, if we don't do it today and my competition does it, like two of us are doing a fairly large workshop when I get back to India, end of December, with one of the Southern India very well-known groups, very traditional group, but right from their founder and their chairperson, they're going to sit for 2 days and they're going to really absorb, interact, and discuss. That's taking it seriously, and that wouldn't have happened a year back, but I think I'm glad to see it's happening now.
Really fascinating, Ganesh. I want to delve into that reimagine part a little more, if you will. For our listeners, let's maybe contextualize that a bit more. So let's take an example. I'll make one up, but please feel free to add yourself. But let's say I'm some kind of a retail company where I perhaps have physical products today in store. As we know, AI can be very helpful for various parts of the processes, right? Like supply chain, I could use it for forecasting, I could use it for customer interactions, etc. But when you're saying reimagining AI, how does that really feel from a board and CEO perspective? Could you give us a couple of examples, whether from this or any other industry?
Well, let's imagine you were the CEO of Walmart, for instance, just to give an example. And it could be a Trent in India or whatever. Okay. So when I say reimagine, you have to reimagine right from the moment of demand. Okay. So for instance, somebody knows there's a great Ruchi Sharma book out on the market. And how do we get that message about what is different about that book to the individual? A. B, how do we do the entire purchasing process where it's absolutely seamless? I mean, you could actually have a little podcast of Ruchi popping up on your screen. You could have naturally you could have a maybe something which can summarize the book for you. And there are a lot of these tools available. And of course, ordering today is very, very easy, and delivery and everything else. So then potentially you could again, as we now talking about, really looking at future books which are in the same genre, actually arriving on your door saying that, look, I didn't order it, but we think you'll like to read it. I mean, so I think reimagining is how do we maximize sales? Obviously, that is the fundamental business objective by getting into the mind space of a potential customer as early on as possible in the life cycle, and then making that entire life cycle or the entire journey to acquiring, reading, purchasing completely seamless. Now, this will mean reimagining the warehouse, it'll reimagine picking, reimagining shipping, everything else. But I'm saying it starts with what is our fundamental objective as a business. And if the fundamental objective of any business is maximizing revenue and maximizing profits, I think all the cost parameters, the revenue parameters, getting to the customer faster will get rematched. And this same logic you can apply to any and every industry, because that's what we are about. I mean, whether it's hospitality or tourism or airlines, anything which touches the customer, absolutely. But even B2B, I mean, B2B business is also saying that, look, we have to be very, very nimble to respond to the needs of large OEM. Only then we'll be in business.
Yeah. And this reimagining, Ganesh, as you have been talking about, it happened when digital transformation was the buzzword, right? Everybody we need to transform our business, make it digital now. Hopefully, many of these organizations have already matured on a digitalized path. Everything is mostly digital now. You could apply AI to that. However, with the reimagining with AI, if I say so, our boards and CEOs realizing that it is not just about technology. You talked about the process transformation that is needed. There is a people aspect to it so that people understand there is concerns on threats of jobs for people. How is the incentive model clarity for the individuals who will be reimagining and executing the operating model, and then the technologies comes in. So our boards realizing the totality of the picture to reimagine and not just thinking AI as a technology solution, because then there is a data aspect as well to it. So it's people, process, tech, and data.
You're absolutely right, Sujay. And I think I'll add leadership to that. I mean, it's people, process, tech, culture, and leadership. And we're actually curating a half-day session in Mumbai in February, exactly around that topic, where we'll first talk about the imperative for reimagining, which we've just discussed. And then we will move on to saying that, look, what is the CIO agenda? Saying that, look, what does the CIO have to look at, and not from a technology point of view. We'll get entrepreneurs to come in and talk about what are the unique solutions which need to be fitted in. And then we'll get the operations team and the HR teams to come in and say that, look, hey, how does this work for us? Because we are the guys who are running the real business. And the CIO might give me support. The entrepreneurs might have very cool technology, but putting it all together in a new jigsaw puzzle that defines the future organization. And that's what we want to do. So we literally want to do it like a 4-hour workshop where at the end of the day, each company can go away with its own conclusions on, okay, these are my next 3 months and how do I make it happen? So I think a lot of work needs to be done to prod people, to get boards to think about it, get leaders to think about it, and make sure, as you rightly said, that it is not a technology agenda, it's not a CIO agenda. And that's what happened. You're so right. I mean, we wrote a book in 2000 called Digital Success, and we steered away from calling it digital transformation because we discovered, we all know that 80% of digital transformation projects did not meet or did not come anywhere near the objectives they set out to do. But it was brushed under the carpet because it was not the CEO's agenda. And the CEO said, oh, I've heard anecdotally that things are going fine. But here we want the CEO to get involved and say, are we getting the kind of benefits we should be getting and could be getting? That's the idea.
And Ganesh, on the previous point, you also made a remark which is kind of still sticking to my head. So I want to delve into that a bit, which is the org chart. You said we need to also reimagine the org chart potentially of how this is going to play up. There are different perspectives here, right? I've heard people and articles written about maybe we also have agents as part of the org chart, or maybe there are agents for which are going to assist people, and the org chart may look widely different. So, what is your perspective, especially again taking large enterprises into account? How, is that going to reimagine the org chart as well?
I'm smiling because I've just been having an argument with my publisher because we're writing a new book on AI leadership, and he says, "Let's call it AI stole my org chart." I said, how corny can that be?" But thinking about it after my conversation, which literally happened 14 hours back, I'm saying maybe you're right. And what you say, Sid, is so right. Because I mean, it's a very kind of a bit funny to say AI stole my org chart, but you're right. My existing org chart is completely irrelevant because we designed it for a time when technology was at best a prod or an enabler. Today we're designing it for technology to be very integral to our business. So you're absolutely right. I mean, there's no question that, and if you think of it that way, reimagining the business, redesigning the processes, redesigning the organization, and then kind of saying that, look, where do I need any people at all? First of all, I mean, the chairman of the board could easily be an AI algorithm. Most chair, yeah, most chairmen are not required if you think about it, because I mean the parameters. I mean, after this one, I'm doing a talk to independent directors on the role of governance. And to my mind, governance, so much of governance can be prodded by AI going forward. So in context, the role of boards, the role of leaders, the role of the middle management, and the role of the entire organization has to change. And you're absolutely right, Sid. The org chart has to be completely revamped, thrown away, and redesigned all over again. Who knows how that works?
Yeah, interesting point, Ganesh. And I just to think of it, you talked about leadership, which is the people aspect. Leadership is very much centralized or looking upwards. I feel in this futuristic org chart, leadership also needs to be decentralized or democratized, wherein because people will be working together with agents, and you need to, as an individual, take up that leadership call, how and where to involve that agent or not. Now, Ganesh, to move forward in our thread of discussion, we talked about people, process, technology, and data. How do you see the realization of the importance of data in this AI success in the minds of boards and CEOs? Or are they again delegating it as a CIO topic, like we discussed about AI as a technology as well?
See, there's nothing wrong in delegating it, but you need to be very aware of what you're delegating. That's the main. I mean, if you look at the classic construct, I mean, my own PhD is in the area of knowledge management from IIT Bombay, and our research was entirely on when does data become good information, when does information contextualized become good knowledge, and eventually how does the organization benefit from the knowledge of, let's say, 5,000 people, and it becomes embedded wisdom of the organization. So a wise organization is one which is not people dependent anymore. So imagine the same construct when you look at AI. AI can be running around with multiple agents all over the place, but at the end of the day, it has to build the capability of the organization. It cannot be kind of, I mean, people cannot abdicate the responsibility to build a wise organization. So in that context, I think data becomes the fundamental building block. You call it the fourth pillar, but it is core. Because if the data you are getting, ingesting into the organization, putting in the data warehouse in the data mart, and probably slicing and dicing later, if that is fundamentally suspect, then the whole business gets corrupted. So I think that's something to be very clear about. And so good, clean data, and then how do you manage it? How do you manipulate it? How do you extract information from it? I think this is a huge area for discussion for all organizations. And what we call data engineering today is nothing but that. The whole process of identification, ingesting, using, disseminating, and of course, analyzing. So I think that's the construct that we have to be very conscious about. Then, of course, you can have data engineers, you can have data warehouse managers who are doing all this. But you, as the leader, must be very aware of what needs to be done and how you want it to get done.
Oh, very true, Ganesh. The biggest hurdle we still see in enterprises is this is happening, but this is happening still at pockets of the enterprise. So, for example, a domain like perhaps marketing, they might be very well utilizing data and analyzing it and using it from a marketing standpoint, but the service side of the organization might be doing something completely different. But from a customer journey, it starts right from the marketing but also goes all the way into service. And if I get disconnected experiences, whether it's an AI model serving that or a typical standard business process serving that, the experience gets siloed in some shape or form. So is that realization, in your opinion, coming with boards and CEOs, not just from a domain and a business unit perspective? As you said rightly, it can be delegated, but that connected thread or fabric or whatever we want to call it of the enterprise still needs to get formed. And that should still be at least in the radar of the boards and CEOs, even if they don't do it themselves, but they at least delegate with that principles in mind. Do you see that kind of realization coming at a scale?
And Ganesh, just let me put on one more layer on Sid's point so that you can address that together. Another part is the context that human beings carry in an organization. Like if you and I are working in a company, we have that business understanding, the knowledge and context to make the decisions on the data. So one of the critical challenges not only about the real data, it's the context of the data as well. Like you talked about your thesis about the knowledge. How will that be translated? And that is a more sticky or a problematic things for the agents to get trained upon, because first it needs to be extracted from the human beings and then stored and structured for the agents to consume. And that again comes back to organization change and culture, and which is a significant topic that a CIO cannot address. A CHRO needs to come in and with the sponsorship of the board.
Oh, you're right. And actually, there are two interesting points. And one is, of course, what you said that, today are boards aware? Yes. Is it on the radar? It better be. I think it has to go beyond the radar. It has to be here and now, and it should be a discussion point in at least a once a quarter board meeting on saying how are we managing intelligence? How is human intelligence interacting with artificial intelligence? And what we call in GTD data, we call it dual intelligence. But the dual intelligence layer is what will make it successful for most organizations. So in that context, if you look at it, boards must ask those questions. I think I was reading a recent McKinsey research which says that all boards, 70% of boards, are realizing that it is a serious issue and we have to now seriously address it as an important asset of the organization, intelligence and data. And so I think that's important. Are we ready for game-changing AI? Not yet, because people are still getting their arms around it. I think that's important. And the point, Sujay, that you were mentioning is very, very important. And I was attending a UL Noah Harari face-to-face discussion in New York last year. And Harari's point was very simple. So he said, if we don't understand how to master AI, AI will master us. So the next generation that we all talk about, AGI, artificial general intelligence, where there will be thinking AI. So it's actually going one step ahead, which is enabled to think on your behalf. I mean, your calendar will be guided not by your spouse for the next 12 months. It will be guided by AI, because AI will tell you what it thinks you should be doing. Sooner or later, you'll be so susceptible to suggestion that you'll just say, okay, fine. I mean, maybe it's a good idea to go to the Arctic. I mean, I'm going to the Antarctic next week, for instance. I mean, that was after a long period of discussion. But imagine if an AI had told me that, look, you're going to enjoy the Antarctic and here's your cruise line, here's your tickets, and here's what you should not do. It might become so easy to accept that is when AI starts taking over. And then if you look at super intelligence, as they say, when AI realizes in its thinking capability that it is far superior to the human, then what happens? I mean, that's beyond our conjecture at this point of time. But I think we have to be prepared for all this. I mean, as intelligent people, all of us, including everybody on the board of a company, will have to prepare for a day when AI can pretty much do everything. And then what do we do and how do we do it is going to be important questions to ask.
And on that thought, also connecting it to the enterprise chart, one of the key issues we see today, at least in some enterprises, is that many of them have data leaders, right? So the board identifies a data leader, whether we call it a chief data officer or a VP of data and analytics. Sometimes the same person is also looking at data and AI. But the big issue is they are not mandated to be business driven. So they are very much as part of, let's say, a CIO organization, or they are part of a tech organization, where even the business requirements comes to them, but they are not really working with business. Or in other words, let me take a real example that we got from Audi, which helped us build the case study. They said, for example, in the production line, they identified that the welding, so when they are welding the cars in the shop floor, they wanted to build an AI model to understand that before it proceeds in the next stage, it detects that the weld is right or wrong. Right. So the one of the data points for that is taking pictures of these welds, looking at historical welds, and seeing when it came back as a recall, and hence you can start training a model to predict whether it will be again having an issue or not downstream, and thereby reducing cost, right? Because of the more time it spends as a recall, it's going to spend more time rewelding, etc. The CDO, for example, identified this is one parameter, but another data parameter might be temperature, because the temperature when you're welding, if it's too high or too low, that could also be an indicator towards a weld going right or wrong. But this required the CDO in this case to be a business driven CDO and not just someone sitting in the IT, because then it may not have been, maybe they might have still found this, but it's not as easy because they're not working day in, day out with business people on the shop floor understanding problems. So with that in mind, do you think the data teams needs to be reimagined in the current context so that they become more effective with business, or how should enterprise go around building this data capability?
No, you're absolutely right. And I think there are three critical roles which have to be very business savvy. And I mean, during my term as chairman of the IT strategy committee of State Bank of India, it's such a large organization. I mean, I was pretty delighted to find the quality of people they had in various functions. For instance, I don't need to hide this. If you look at the chief technology officer of State Bank of India, Nitin Chugh, I mean, Nitin is a business guy. I mean, he's been a CEO. He was part of Ujjivan Finance, HDFC, one of the leaders there. So when he talks technology, he comes with a very, very deep, ingrained understanding of every business process. And similarly, I mean, even if you look at the chief, they don't call it the data officer, but I mean the guy who handles all data across the bank. I mean, very competent. The CIO, the CIOs themselves. I mean, for a very long time, were deputy managing directors of the bank who actually were rotated from bank functions. So this is a very wise method of looking at it. Of course, you need technology. I mean, you need the best technology in the world. You will have a TCS or somebody who will send in an army of people to make it happen for you. But technology is not the board discussion. The board discussion is information. It is the management of technology and, of course, the management of data. So, to that extent, absolutely right. I hadn't thought about that way, but Sid, but you're right. The chief data officer, the chief technology officer, the chief information officer must be, if not from the business, they should be extremely business savvy. And I think it's probably true for all functions today. I mean, a lot of CHROs, I mean, for managing the classical HR people, but they're people from the business who have come in and say, hey, this is what we need to do with people. And this is even more important when we talk about data and technology.
Yeah. And now, Ganesh, if we shift our focus to another aspect, see, one of the important role of a board is towards risk management, right? For the enterprising, and role of data is very critical to that, because as with the increasing leverage of AI, we call data as a fire in the book, because it's not only a source of energy or business value. With the increasing use of AI, and wrong data could lead you to wrong decisions and data leaks and everything. Data could increasingly burn down your enterprise as well. So the threat and risk increases. So there's this duality of data that exists now, and the negative side is increasing more, and also the positive side. Is that duality realized at the board and CEO level, to see, this is like fire, and we, as the custodians of the enterprise, then must take more interest and control on the data as well, because that's also sits within our risk management umbrella or responsibility area.
No, I think it's absolutely right. And I think it was Narayan Murthy who once said, in God we trust, the rest bring data. So I think that's so true. I think the day of the, legendary, superb CEOs who knew everything at the back of their hand, I think that's going away now. And boards are increasingly realizing that we cannot, I mean, we're not just here to mentor the charismatic superstar CEO. We are here to build an organization which is sustainable. One of the books I'm researching right now is something called The Conscious Leader. And the conscious leader of the future will be conscious about the fact that, look, he himself or she herself is time limited, in the sense that, the organization cannot be imprinted by his or her personality. So you have to build organization that is data. Superb data, well managed, well converted to information, and knowledge being derived from that. I think that is what will make organizations sustainable. So I think any conscious board, any conscious leader will ensure that data and technology become a fundamental asset to what they will do in future. That's very, very important.
And to distill one of the concepts Ganesh, we have introduced, since we're talking about data as a fire, and there is intensity of fire that we measure, right? If you have if you know it's a candle, you can come close to it, even bring your finger. But if it's a bonfire, you stay away from it. So we have introduced a term called data intensity. And every use case with AI will need higher intensity of data. And we have created a framework called QCS Framework to understand data intensity, where Q stands for quality. You talked about the cleanliness of data. C is compliance, not only external regulations, domain specific regulations, country specific regulations, but internal companies, policies, and guidelines who should have access to data, right? And then the third important aspect with is speed. Because with agentic AI, one of the difference will be that it cannot wait for a human to feed the data. The data and the information and that context must be readily be available for each agentic AI deployed in that reimagining process. So the QCS becomes very important. And for any agentic AI use case, it will be high in data intensity, high on quality, high on compliance, high on speed. With this concept, what would be your perspective about it? And do you see boards and CEOs and organizations you're interacting with, are they ready to fulfill this high data intensity requirement, which is going to change significantly in this AI agentic world?
Making a tick mark to myself that I should read your book again and master QCS. It'll be useful for all my future sessions. No, but you're absolutely right, because it is one level to understand and appreciate the value of data, but another peeling of another layer of the onion that you must peel to understand that, look, as you said, quality, intensity are the very, very important aspects. And I think organizations are getting there. I mean, at this point of time, I'd be happy if they realize the value of data, or the fact that master data management is an essential precursor to anything that they want to achieve through machine learning or artificial intelligence. So I think that's important. But as you said, understanding the ramifications of weak data and ensuring the data intensity and data quality are of paramount importance. I think that's a realization that must come hopefully to, all the data managers, and should also percolate all the way up to the board, no question. The problem, Sujay, is that everything becomes a CEO's agenda. The poor CEO says, I'm going berserk.
Exactly. And then they need to prioritize it. And talking of the chief data officer, another thing we propose that this chief data officer should be reporting to the CEO to help the CEO drive this change, which is not just a technology change, it's an organization transformation.
Well, I mean, to give you an example, the CTO of State Bank of India reports straight to the chairman of the board. Can you believe it? I mean, so because the chairman in State Bank is also the CEO, it's a different story. But I'm just saying that is the importance you have to give to certain functions. I haven't seen a situation where the chief data officer reports to the CEO, but who knows?
Now, Ganesh, we've talked a lot about enterprises, more the larger ones, but let's say I am more a new entrant, SME kind of an enterprise. With this, power that I have today, because I have data and AI in my hands, and obviously I need to have a business idea in mind, which with the right product market fit, etc. But do you think with this power which data and AI gives today, it's possible much faster for an SME to build its brand, build a competitive differentiation, of course with the right business ideas in place? But I'm more thinking because the earlier hurdle used to be scale in terms of number of people or the resources I have in hand. Do you almost feel like data and AI, if used correctly, could minimize this deficiency that most SMEs have today?
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, everything in me wants me to agree with what you're saying. My only concern is, like, even if you look at Industry 4.0 and other areas that people were looking at, the SMA implementation has been poor in this country. I mean, there's no question about that. So, I mean, one response to that from big manufacturing is to almost like automate everything so that you don't need many people on the shop floor, you don't need too many SMEs, and then let the SME struggle through their own weak processes. But we'll still get the quality we want because we're kind of managing that. So it's a very kind of input centric capability that people are looking at. But to answer your questions, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is no question that every organization that wants to be a profitable and high quality business must manage data better. I mean, I'll give an example from our own slum community work that we're doing. Today, we have 50 what we call lighthouses, which are joint ventures with 5 state governments. And in every slum community, or at least in most slum communities, we will have a lighthouse which enables somebody to walk in, decide whether he or she wants a career and wants to move forward, what skills they need, etc., etc. We are now implementing a very comprehensive data platform that literally from the time the mobilizer or the social worker finds a young person, 22 years old in the slum. I mean, like we said in the retail example earlier, we want AI to tell us how to deal with this person based on the knowledge of the family background, how tough it has been for that child, how does the counselor really interact with the person. So it's a bit of psychology and actual concern for the human being built in. Now, this is important. And people ask me, my God, you're a social organization. Why are you trying to do all this stuff? And we're saying that, look, this is why we are different. Okay. This is why we're not counting numbers and say 800 people trained, out of which 300 people took up a job and 150 dropped out, which used to be the statistic of skills. But we're saying if we want 80% of the people we touch to really want to respond and to want to build a great career for themselves and their families, we have to use a lot of intelligence. So I'm saying exactly by this logic, I mean, if you can do it in the social sector, why can I not do it if I am, let's say, an ancillary to a Kirloskar or a Bajaj Auto or a Suzuki? Absolutely, they must. So I think there's a lot of evangelizing that still needs to be done. I think the government as well as people, consultants, need to spend time with the SME community, whether it's in SME clusters or SMEs one at a time. That is what that is. I mean, like when we said data bottom up will bring better intelligence to the organization. Entities bottom up, which includes the micro SMEs, that is what will bring an overall, if you're talking about make in India, I think we need to think of it from that point. So very exciting, your question. Makes me think of a lot of stuff that we should be preaching to government to try and make happen.
Very commendable work you are doing in the social sector, I must add.
We love it. I spend every possible moment in that because that is what ultimately will define if I can make 1 million young lives changed. I mean, that's
Yeah,
mission for me.
really commendable, Ganesh. Now, if we then take the next leap, how do you see organizations? Are they thinking about a journey approach to agentic AI and data maturity? Because it will not be a switch of a button, right? You will start with initial discussions, the workshops you are doing, then it needs resource allocation, capital allocation to make it happen. You have to bring in the leadership with you. You need to understand the change you're bringing in. You might have to define KPIs to monitor that. So it's a significant journey, maybe 3 to 5 years journey, depending upon the size of the company and where they are presently. How do you see organizations thinking as a structured change management approach and structured journey approach to make things happen?
I think I would say if you look at India organizations that I interact with, I mean, I'm on the board of 5 of them. And I think I would say 4 out of 5 are very conscious of the fact that we have to do this, no question. And the 5th one is getting there because they're in the process of building their business extremely fast. So in that context, some systems get second-hand treatment. But I think everybody's conscious. I mean, there's no question about that one. And to take this forward, I think people will have to come up with almost like a 2-year agenda. I wouldn't call it a 5-year agenda because 5 years is too long in this era. But over the next 2 years, I mean, if you look at it as 8 quarters, what is it we want to accomplish? What are the measures by which we can say we've been successful, both in terms of implement or initiating an agentic AI process, looking at it process by process or function by function and seeing what happens. I mean, so I think it's a full-fledged strategic planning effort that has to be done. I mean, I know the big consulting firms are doing something like that, whether it's a McKinsey or a BCG or a KPMG and Deloitte, for instance, and are doing tremendous work in that area. But every board has to decide to do it. I mean, it has to come from within. It has to have the buy-in of the board and the rest of the organization. And then, as we all know, I mean, then the data management piece has to be addressed. Then get in a consultant, if you will, or whoever will help you to build. But the grand plan, if you will, I think that must be in the mind of the board and be reviewed literally on a quarterly basis, if not monthly.
And that calls for a change or upgradation of skills at the board level as well, because if they have to lead with this grand plan, they need to reimagine themselves and the role of the board too, right? In terms of understanding the nuances, not be at a superficial level, maybe have the ability to go into one level deeper to bring about this change. How do you see the mindset and the profile of the boards? Are the boards well equipped to do that, or do you see change needed at the board level as well?
I think if you look at what, let's say, I mean, if you look at the finance sector, I mean, we used to joke in State Bank that we have 3 bosses. I mean, we have SEBI, we have the Reserve Bank of India, and of course, we have Finance Ministry. So there's enough pressure to make sure it happens. I mean, as IT strategy committee chair of State Bank, I mean, I literally had to know everything when it came to security or data planning and anything that was customer facing, for instance. So clearly we need to do that. But what is more important, apart from the mandate or the statutory requirement to do things, is a wanting to make this happen. So, for instance, I'm part of a wonderful group of independent directors, which is called the Gravitas Group of Deloitte, and it's personally managed by Shefali Garodia, who's the chairperson of Deloitte in India right now. So Shefali's group is really addressing issues like this. Like we had a full discussion on AI some time back. And the basic premise was that, look, if we are not comfortable with AI and if we kind of still want to look over our shoulder or look at the CIO when a discussion on AI comes up, we're not performing our function. Because in terms of all the Clause 49 requirements of an independent director, the management of risk, audit function, etc. I think for all this, you need to have a good understanding of how you can be supported by technologies like AI and is the data accurate? In God we trust, the rest bring data. And the data that people bring have to be questioned by the board. That's the only way it can work. But it's getting there. I mean, I would be lying if I said that every board is doing this, but I would say 40% of the boards are at least conscious of it. And out of the 40%, maybe 30% are very aggressively, if I may use the word, making it happen. The rest will fall in line because of competitive pressures, because of statutes, because of expectations from your stakeholders. So all that is going to be happening very soon. And people have to get ready. I mean, otherwise, it's not a FOMO any longer. You'll just be obsolete.
I fully agree, Ganesh. I mean, one of the things we added, as you rightly said, peeling the onion in the book, is we see a lot of, as you just echoed, we see a lot of the board CEOs, data leaders seeing the maturity journey, even getting some investment in it. But how do you track that journey and pivot as needed, right? What one of the things we saw was a lot of investment was done on what we call as the supply side of data. So the data warehouse, the reports, the metadata, etc. This is all from a supply standpoint. But perhaps demand is not coming enough to meet that supply. Or vice versa, you are having a lot of demand for agentic AI, which requires high speed data, but you are only delivering the data once every day as per your supply. So how do you kind of track where the demand versus supply is almost like a quadrant, and thereby plot your maturity journey if you're getting both demand and supply coming in?
So I think when you say demand, I mean, essentially the way I see demand is an actionable insight.
Correct.
Okay. So are people dealing with customers, dealing with supply chains, getting enough insights to make them perform better at their function? So we don't expect them to ask for, can I get this data from this data mart? Okay. But we're saying that, can I get this insight, please? I mean, can I know what the customer is likely to do 3 months from down the line? So when the question is asked correctly, effectively, it's a prompt engineering kind of question. And then how do you then design systems that pump up this knowledge from the information base, the information from the database, and have clean data, etc.
Correct.
So
Exactly.
I think those are the questions we ask. So I think on one hand, you must manage demand, because if you keep your end user uneducated, to use a word, and the user says that, oh, this is how we've always done it, and I mean, I'll cope with this and I'll deal with a 1 month old report. I mean, it's no longer valid. I mean, people have to be aggressively asking, why can't I get information today, which based on all the data that happened till 1 hour back? I mean, there's no reason why it can't be done. So I'm saying instant responses, real-time systems, real-time use of data, which is coming in. I mean, it's like as we say, changing the aircraft engines while the plane is flying, and the aircraft engines have to be changed, which means data has to be refreshed even as the operation is going on. That will be joy. That will be the joy of a very harmonious data to information to actionable insight kind of continuum, and that's what organizations need in future.
Yeah. And Ganesh, the demand has been existing for data as well. It's more like also connecting the demand and the supply. And for a board level and the CEO level, help them visualize the quantification of demand so that they then understand the importance of data, not only in business transformation or AI agentic approach outcomes that they're looking for. So in our book, we have formulated 3 KPIs, like the total addressable value. It's like the TAM for your data within the organization, and then based upon the roadmap, what is the expected addressable value, and then finally the realized value. These metrics, we believe, will enable the chief data officer or head of data then go to the board and the CXOs to present how their supply is fulfilling the demand and what potential remains to be achieved. So this will give boards and the CEOs the ammunitions to then make capital allocation decisions judiciously towards fulfilling the supply and also chart their roadmap. So do you see both CEOs are having this kind of a KPI approach, understanding the demand value within the organization?
So they should. My point is that that might be too much of detail for a board. But that's why I said if the board is demanding enough actionable insights, to use my previous term, I think when this happens because people will start worrying about what are the next question that people are going to ask. Do I have the data readiness? And that could be the KPI of many middle managers saying that look, one key performance indicator is how effectively and how promptly can you deliver data and how accurately also I think is very important. So I think if you have that embedded in your key result areas, it'll work. But if your key result areas is still based on anecdotal, did you do a great sales score of stuff, then people are only going to rely on nice stories and not on data. So I think the culture of asking for data, the culture of listening to data, the culture of managing through data, I think that is an imperative for any organization.
Connecting this to the reimagining theme, Ganesh, I think the next evolution from a maturity standpoint is if the business leaders sit with the board and the CEO to also perhaps find new business value streams with data. So, for example, you might have monetization opportunities, right? Where you, for example, have a lot of data about uh, for instance your customer, or if they are, maybe if you're selling a car, you have a lot of information from the device itself, which can enable more monetization, such as better contracts, insurance, or a better service, right? Upsell, cross sell. So in a way, data can also improve or create new business models altogether for the business, right?
And that's already happening. Remember, 10 years back in Bajaj General Insurance, I mean, they were using a product called Car IQ, and it was fitted into the car. It was part of the insurance. And, it actually track driving habits of each person, the amount of braking he does or she does. So I think from that point of view, I mean, even then saying this is what the insurance premium should be based on how good the driver is, I think is important. And you keep wanting to improve your own performance because it'll monetarily affect you in one way or the other. And I think that's the beauty of what would be something to look at.
Awesome.
But it's a fascinating journey. It's still being played out. I think it'll take another maybe 2-3 years before we see the maturity of what's happening. But it'll be good to track this as we go along. And I think boards should track it. And I think people like you and me should be tracking it on behalf of boards to say that, look, are we really best in class? Are we competitive in terms of our management of data? And that will determine their future success going forward.
Yeah, so such a fascination time, right, Ganesh? And you have such a long experience. How do you compare or rate these present times of excitement with Gen AI and others with all that you have done in the past? What would be your personal insights, Ganesh?
No, I mean, if you, it's completely steering away from the data point. The amount of overhype that the AI economy has created in the stock market is scary. I mean, I was on a Z Business, very interesting chat just 3 days ago. Or this whole bubble trouble that we call it of AI, and I mean, as I said, I'm an optimist, and I don't think we are overhyping AI, but there is a certain amount of froth that is being created. So, am I optimistic? I hope so. Am I realistic enough to believe that a lot of things can go wrong? I think that's something that we have to think about.
Comes back to the people, right? I mean, the AI is the enabler, but how we use it as enterprises, as individuals, will probably, as governments, as you rightly said as well,
Yeah.
will be key.
Let's see. We should all be positive about the future, and people like us who are researching all the time. I think we need to be even more positive.
Yeah, as you have interacting with so many people within the organizations, both in the corporate and also in the social sector. How are individuals taking from your perspective? Are more and more seeing AI as a tool for individual improvement, or there is a lot of threat and concern that AI is going to take a job? So maybe a little bit of views from your side, just to enlighten us.
You're reminding me of Mr. Narayan Murthy's famous 72 hours work. But see, I'm finding that young people, I mean, if you look at the Gen Zs who are both admired and criticized all the time, are extremely fascinated by this topic. So, I mean, nobody wants to do repetitive work. But if you throw this problem at a young person and say that, look, let's see what kind of insights we can create for this particular process or this particular task, and you articulate it properly, I'm finding people love it. I mean, I have this young man called Nathaniel who runs what is called the mission cell of the whole lighthouse communities. And a guy like Nathaniel, for instance, is very young, very impressionable, but extremely insightful in terms of what he thinks the slum child must need for the future. And I mean, probably not much older than his beneficiary. So I'm saying this is the raw material we have. I mean, the extraordinary talent of young people in this country. But if we burden them with the same processes and the same thinking of, let's say, 20 years ago, and say, look, when I was your age, I was doing this. I mean, when you were that person's age, the kind of opportunity was not there at all. So I'm saying all of us, irrespective of how old we are or how young we are, must recognize the opportunity, and we must be able to bring people together and say, let's leverage the data and make that opportunities happen. So I think that's very, very important. And to answer your question, I'm very positive that as a country, especially in India, given the amount of uh, intellectual horsepower we have, I think it's tremendous opportunity for us. But if we sit back and say that, look, we don't want to learn, we don't want to do new things, that's not good. So even if there are any young people watching this program, I'd say this is your time, your generation, and just learn what you can about what's happening in the world and build new ideas, new businesses, new paradigms based on this. That's the future.
Yeah, and however, organizations, Ganesh, continuing on that thread, many in the India I've heard like the freshers joining organizations, and you will see those roles are more susceptible for AI agents to be deployed. And we are hearing that from consulting organizations as well. The freshers are preparing presentations, you don't need them. So how do you then bridge this gap? And if those freshers don't join, they will not gather the experience. So that is a huge gulf that will get created for new people who are looking to enter the workforce, and those roles are actually the significant target for AI deployment in enterprises to get productivity and their operating margin improvement.
No, you're absolutely right. And that this is why, I mean, today the opportunity is probably much brighter for a bachelor in business administration than a bachelor in technology. No doubt about that. Because as you rightly said, technology work. I mean, today there is hardly a programmer in this country who's actually writing programs. Old days they used to put it out on the web. Today ChatGPT does most of the work for them. So there's no question that people are using it. I'm also worried that some writers are also using ChatGPT to write their books. Okay, so and publishers are also getting smart, fortunately, that they know when something is plagiarized, etc., etc. So I think if we can expose our young people to a larger context, I mean, I wouldn't call it a business, but at least a function, etc. So that'll be better. Then if they say that, look, you sit in a corner, be a techie, and we will tell you what is to be done or what PowerPoint to be created. You are absolutely right. I mean, there is absolutely no reason why a smart AI tool will not take it over in future. So I think young people also have to be, right from their teens, will have to be told that they have to think wider. I mean, they have to think on broader topics and get a worldview when they're, let's say, 18 or 24, when they can really contribute to an organization. That'll make them valuable. The future of jobs is all about intellect being deployed, for much wider thinking than it was in the past.
So just to lighten things up, we've discussed a lot of deep subjects here, both from a world perspective, from enterprise, etc. But just to lighten things up, Ganesh, if you were to personify data into a fictional or a real person that you can think of, what would that be? And for our listeners, why would that be that person?
Well, I think a persona should be the fairy godmother. Because if you remember your Cinderella story, when the fairy godmother gives her a opportunity to go to the ball, that's when she discovers, I mean, hopefully insights about the prince and everybody else. So I think we all need a fairy godmother, which is good data, which can then power us onto that insight. Otherwise, we are all depending on the contextual story that we are growing up with. But a world of imagination, a world of new insights, a world of opportunity, I think that's what your godmother should give you, and hopefully that is data.
Yeah, very well said, and all of us and the organization needs that fairy godmother to bless and to bring that transformation that we are not seeing, right?
Let's see how it goes in future.
And if it's a well knowledged fairy godmother, maybe even it can be a chat GPT tapped on top of it, where you don't have to directly talk to the fairy godmother. You have a chat bot.
I don't agree. I don't think a fairy godmother needs to be smarter than you, but she should just be able to open up the opportunity where you can go on a voyage of discovery.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
very true.
You should be smarter than her, but she should give you the opportunity. That's what I'm saying.
yeah,
Very true.
yeah, yeah. Wonderful discussion. And Ganesh, what do you think then about data as the fourth pillar? Just to get some outside in views, when you have heard about the topic, we reached out to you, and you have kindly provided some help during the book process as well.
No,
So
absolutely.
how do you
I
see it?
think, I think you should get it out to more people. I think it's important. And maybe, sometimes it's worthwhile just telling your publisher and maybe, putting it out in an ASCOM conference, letting
Yeah.
people walk away with it. So I think there's some work to be done because that will also open up people's horizons. Otherwise, the problem is there are too many books. We all know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Today, a successful book is one which sells, let's say, 3,000 copies, not 30,000 copies, unless you're
Yeah.
top. So from that point of view, now how do you get enough people to take notice? And I think enough conversations like this will also open up people's horizons to making that happen.
No, we
Yeah.
appreciate your feedback and during the process as well as now. So really appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for your support, and
Yeah.
let's keep championing the cause of data as a core pillar, fourth or second or first. Let any company decide for themselves. And thank you, Ganesh, for your time. Totally appreciate it.
I've actually been thinking that we should start doing a series of discussions. Maybe we can get Deloitte or somebody to anchor it. But let me think about it. I think
That's a great idea.
with the work you're doing and the work you've done, and in fact our new book coming out on leadership in the era of AI, I think we should probably look at getting more thinking and
Correct.
getting more CEO roundtables together.
Correct.
So let me figure out how that can be structured as we go.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Sure,
guys.
Ganesh.
All the best.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Welcome back. That was a phenomenal inaugural episode of our podcast, a conversation with Ganesh Natarajan, leveraging his decades of experience as a CEO, board member, and technology leader. So, Sid, what are our key takeaways?
So many, Sujay, right? Let's try to limit to around 3 key takeaways that I had, but so many great takeaways from this episode. The first key takeaway that I have, Sujay, is what Ganesh said about the boards and CEOs. That was a great discussion I think we had about delegation, and of course data also needs to be delegated from the board and the CEO perspective. But what Ganesh really made very well aware is that boards and CEOs show the path forward, right? And also both of us on our daily roles also see the value that the C-suite and the executives bring. So they need to show the way forward and also be cognizant and aware how data can make an impact transforming the business as a whole. And he made a very good point about those enterprises who do not strategically leverage data have the risk of existence in a few years, especially with the advent of AI.
Rightly put, Sid. And connected to that, what I took as the first key takeaway is when Ganesh talked about reimagining the business holistically, not considering AI only as a technology, but also reimagining the business processes, the people capabilities, the leadership that is required, and in addition, reimagining how data is leveraged across the business.
Absolutely. We had some great conversations on the reimagining factor and also how agents come together potentially to reimagine the org chart, as he said. So let's go to my second takeaway. That's something you briefly hinted, Sujay. That's the social angle, especially with his great work in the Lighthouse Communities Foundation, but also the way he's brilliantly connected data in that whole space, right? To identify the right personas and how what are the needs of different personas based on some of the data that has been collected and the intelligence out there, and also the kind of people he has set up for that. He mentioned the example of Nathaniel, for instance, who's also bringing great ideas. So the combination of data and people, because as we both know, data is great, but unless the right people don't unlock it with the right ideas, and in this case for the social angle, using it for better understanding the needs of different people who need the social help. I thought that was a great initiative that he's doing.
Yeah, well captured, Sid. After all, we, the people, are the ones who are going to bring in any new tech like AI or even leverage data as a strategic pillar across the operating model. So, the people capabilities, the people involvement, and clarifying that incentive model for the people is key. And in addition to that, Sid, one of the heartful moment for me was that when Ganesh said that he has taken a note for himself on QCS for data intensity about applying the QCS quality, compliance, and speed framework in his future discussions on leveraging data. So, frankly, that was really happy for me when I heard he saying that.
Absolutely. I mean, that was really good to hear that he found value in some of the frameworks that we've mentioned in the book. So, yeah, that was great. So, my third key takeaway, and this was a very broad topic, and I'm sure Ganesh would have much more insights, but he gave us a sneak peek in the conversation about also how data and AI can be applied at a really large scale. For instance, not just at large enterprises, he mentioned a few examples at a country and a government level as well. Especially with his background, he mentioned about some of the key aspects that could be used in India, for instance. How data, for example, could be used to better improve the lives of people in the country, and then he gave some ideas. But I felt that there was a lot more that he could even share more on this. But I think with his great a background, as well as him talking to various leaders in the government, I think that all goes well for how data gets applied in the future of India as a country.
Yeah, and that's very crucial. And thinking about my final key takeaways about thinking about the future, the path forward. And as Ganesh articulated, it must be a structured, strategic maturity journey and not a quick fix, both for leaders and also for the young people. For leaders, they must move beyond anecdotal reporting and establishing a 2 year agenda to ensure that their data supply, the readiness, can meet the quantified demand, which we call the actionable insights, to remain competitive. And for the young people who are starting their career and growing, looking forward to grow their career, they need to develop additional skills and knowledge beyond just technology to contribute to their career growth in the AI first age.
Great point, Sujay. Thank you everyone for joining us in this conversation, our first one with Ganesh Natarajan. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode of Data as the Fourth Pillar, the Board and CXO briefing. Till then, take care. Bye bye.
Bye.